head. That's 9.5 weight percent lead. So that's not soil that's contaminated with lead, that's lead slag. And it's high enough that you could refine it and produce pure lead. But that aside, what we were able to do was to use what you can now do routinely on Google Maps is overlay an aerial photograph. In 2003, that took a lot of work, but we were able to produce this in a way so the community could understand the spatial distribution of the data, the concentration of the data, and make judgments about where they wanted to take samples. Next slide. Here are those questions, though. When people ask, how do you develop the skills in your community, I just teach them about the general questions about making a map. How do you group the concentration ranges? What are the representative borders of the areas related to the sample? How do you judge surface data versus subsurface data? You can combine that with the residents' knowledge and hopefully identify pollutant sources. Next slide. I thought I had deleted that, but go ahead. Jump through this. So I'm going to talk mainly about Hickory Woods today. It's a housing development that was bordering an old, it was a DEC Class II Superfund site in the city of Buffalo. The site had been Republic Steel and the Donner Hanna Coke Mill, and those were torn down in the late 80s. About the same time, the city started a housing development in the neighborhood adjacent to that. The housing development was expanded, and despite a warning from the New York State Department of Health to do a full environmental assessment on this adjacent land before they started construction, the city ignored that and fired the contractor who asked for an environmental assessment, hired a contractor who would not do an environmental, didn't need one, and started building homes. In 1999, as they were building digging a foundation, liquid coke waste started flowing, and the city inspector shut it down. The city tested the street, along the street, evacuated 3 existing houses, remediated those 4 lots, the lot that they had found, and those 3 families signed an agreement not to talk about anything, and they were moved back into the house. And the people next door said, "Why is my fence magic?" So EPA, especially some now retired staff from this site at Kiel Burma and Dick Salke came in, and when they were showed a video that the residents took of city workers and trucks excavating the area at 2 o'clock in the morning, they thought, maybe we have a problem here, Houston. And so they set up an extensive sampling in this 66 houses in the neighborhood. They took 660 soil samples. And that data set was an incredibly large data set, very rich with information, but only accessible, each individual piece of data was only accessible to the person who lived on that lot. And so the community said, where are the hot spots? How do I relate what I have on my lot to my neighbors? And the EPA said, well, we'd have to go door to door and get permission from everybody. And we don't have the staff to do that. But I do. So we went door to door, got signed permissions, and started creating GIS maps of the data to answer the simple question from the community, where are the hot spots? Next slide. So this just shows you some photos of rallies in the neighborhood that angered the elected officials, the ones who made the decision to ignore the state health department. Next slide. And so we wanted to use GIS to develop maps of the surface and subsurface contamination. Eleanor Coffey did a master's degree studying the historical GIS data to identify pollution sources. I'm going to talk about establishing baseline and comparison data sources, especially for arsenic. And Dr. Tammy Malello, during her dissertation, developed geographic information analysis that I'm going to talk about. So if you'll click to